Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are on part 2 of our Terminator X install. If you missed the first video, basically I went through and showed you how all the wires I had disconnected and everything I took out from the factory that we don't need anymore. And basically just get rid of that and lose some weight, lose all that junk, and so it's not in the way. But today basically we're going to get started on installing everything now, and this should go a little bit quicker. But kind of show you some of the things that how I installed the Holley Terminator X parts on the car and where I installed them all and whatnot. So today we're basically going to start on installing new harnesses and main harness here. I already have the injector harness installed, basically hooked up, I should say, to the injectors. Kind of have it hidden and run along the intake there. I also have the TFI or distributor harness run here too. Kind of have it hidden or tucked up with some of the other wires, but kind of have them loosely also put to the back here because we'll have to have the other, before we button all that or see how we're going to route them, we'll have to get the main harness out. You know, and here's the main harness that's going to be run in there. I would say from here all the way over there, that's going to be in the inside firewall. That's where all the hookup for the computer is. And here's some extra breakout, you know, relay, fuel pump relay, and some other inputs and outputs. Some of these other wires though, I think I'm going to break this whole thing apart and kind of dismantle the harness, even though they have a real nice harness here. Some of these wires will be run back in through the firewall, so I'm going to try and basically pull all this stuff off, clean up as much as I can, or put as much to the inside of the firewall as I can, or cut it off, and then I'm going to lay it up here into the engine bay and kind of try and route everything how I want it, clean it up, make it as simple as possible, maybe even tie it into some of these other harnesses so we don't have 3 harnesses running along the intake. We'll have, you know, just one. It'll all be tied together. Alright, so I got the main harness here all tore apart. This is the green connector that came with the Holley EFI system, and it doesn't fit in there. I mean, it's shaped the same and whatnot, but if you look, I don't know if you'll be able to see on the camera here, but there's kind of slots cut in these tubes here, and they're different from this green one to the black one here. The green one's kind of got them on the sides on that one, and this one's got one in the middle on the bottom, and then this one's on the side. So the pins should all be in the same position. It's just a matter of taking that housing off. So I had to just pull the wires out of the green one there and just put them in the same spots on here, and then it'll plug right, you know, right into there and fit fine. So that was kind of the only issue with that one. The only other circuits that I had here, one is for the if you're running points, which I'm not, so that circuit will basically be cut. And then the other one is the 12-volt battery fuel, which will be run to the battery, and my car has the battery run on the inside. So that'll all be kind of tied in. So basically from here this way will all be on the inside. So we're getting ready to install it and start kind of hooking stuff up so I can see where everything's going to lay out, and then we'll basically tie everything together. We'll actually install the harness in the car, and then where I got everything run, I'll kind of pull the harness back off and then put all the loom and stuff back on it and finish it up real nice, get it all taped up and whatnot, and then reinstall it. Alright, so I got my oil pressure sensor installed here. You can see it's teed off from the factory oil pressure sender. Actually both are plugged in there, and then it's basically teed into the another T. Actually my Pro Charger is oil fed, so I don't have a self-contained unit, so everything is teed in right there to the typical oil sender spot, and then I got the harness run down to it, and everything's kind of tied up in the harness. I got most of my sensors installed. I got my oil pressure sensor, or my fuel pressure sensor installed. I got the adapter on there, so that's plugged in. This is the harness where the oil pressure and the TFI are all tied into. So I got that all loomed together. It's separate from the injector harness, but that's all tied in. And then it runs up there and basically taped up. I haven't plugged all of that in yet because it's going to depend on where my throttle cables and stuff kind of sweep behind there. But so I got those sensors plugged in. Got my coolant temp sensor put in now. That's all hooked up. This is for the IAC, so that's all ready to go. Run along here and then up to the main harness. And then basically that's all tied up on the back side. And then I got it all run through down here, through the hole. Then I have two wires coming off of there. One is for the, actually one harness is just factory stuff that runs down through the shock tower here. So that's an old one. And then the other one actually runs to the O2 sensor. And you can kind of see down in there. And I have the O2 sensor in there, and then it's just kind of zip tied to the K-member. There wasn't really a good way of running it up this way, so I decided to run it kind of through the K-member away from the header. And then I have it up in here, just coming through the shock tower there. And they send a pretty long cable, and then there's a little adapter harness for it. So I didn't have a good way of tying all that up either, or shortening that. So what I'm probably going to do is just kind of loop it up inside here and zip tie it to the inside of the shock tower. Should be fine, kind of out of the way. Should be protected basically from debris and water and all that stuff up in there anyway. So otherwise, here's where the O2 sensor comes, kind of from the K-member. I had to shave down you can kind of see right here, I had to kind of shave down part of the connector here, actually, just to get it through this hole. And then it runs up underneath. Sorry about that. I try and get it kind of through the K-member, so. But that's kind of where I found it would be a good spot to run that through. And then otherwise out here, everything is more or less ready to go. So then we have inside the cab, I got the main harness, or the part of the factory harness, all hooked up or back together and kind of looped up inside here. Any other unwanted wires are kind of shoved way up in there. So that's all plugged in. I got the main harness here running along, and then underneath the carpet and cut through. So that's all hooked up here now. And then I got a few wires here just kind of tuck away. I got the MAF sensor there. That's going to be hidden up in here somewhere. I got to run the vacuum line or the boost line to it. And then I got to hook up, these long leads here, basically to the battery. One's for the fuel pump that I'm not going to be using, so that'll be tucked up in there too. So we're getting closer. And kind of once we get some of these wires tied up and kind of shoved back in there, we can start putting some of this carpet back. And then I got to run the main harness here, battery harness. And then just kind of run that along. And I have the battery in the back, so that shouldn't be too hard either. So we're getting closer. So I got the wideband O2 sensor harness all tied up in the wheel well here. Like I said before, it's a really long harness, and it's kind of a tough place to where to put it, but I got it kind of zip tied up here in a big loop, and it should be fine. I know you'll get a little bit of water and stuff like that if you're driving in the rain, but if the seals are doing their job, or the connectors, we should have no issues. Okay, my next step was to get the mass airflow, or not mass airflow, but MAF sensor mounted in here. So I kind of have it tucked up in here, wires running to it. There wasn't really a good place to screw it down necessarily. I guess I could zip tie it there, but the way the vacuum boost line comes in and the harness plugs into it, wasn't really a good way, so to specifically mount it there. So this should be pretty good. One reason, you know, this hose here will be tucked up tight and should be all behind the kick panel. But one reason I do have it mounted on the inside, kind of mentioned before that that's how it was before. The Anderson Motorsports, you know, ECM was sitting here, and they had just a short harness coming off, and they wanted it mounted here just to get it out of the engine bay, keep it from vibrating and the heat and everything else. So I don't know if they have issues with them or had issues with them, but so that's why I just figured I'd keep it on the inside, and just routed everything here, and it should be good. So we'll get that tucked up in there. Otherwise, we have, you know, a couple connectors here that we have the fuel relay or fuel fuse right there. This here is a power tap that Holley puts in here, so there's different power, you know, key on and 5-volt reference, a ground, stuff like that if you need it for anything else. I shouldn't need that. And then the fuel fuse I won't be using, even though it'll still be there because I'm running the old factory wiring yet. But and then the other connector here is inputs and outputs, which we'll be using probably a couple of those, but that'll be next here, kind of on the step. And then we have, you know, these wires here that'll have to be hooked up. We got power ground, ones for the fuel relay power, stuff like that. So, all right, next I got my main power harness plugged in or wired up. It's not connected yet. I got it plugged in there, ran along the bottom. That's the fuse for it right there. Then I just went through the carpet and down through there. I also had to run this power wire here that comes for the runs to the fuel, or the fuel relay. So that's the main power there, but basically ran it along here. I have my battery in the back here, so ran it kind of down through this quarter panel down here, and then it comes out right there, and then I just ran it to those two posts there, being they weren't being used. Otherwise they use these other ones here, the top post part of it, for everything else. So I just figured, well, I'll just run it right to there. Next I'm going to try and tackle the display right here. I had made a little bracket for the old display that I had from the PMS system. That just kind of went inside here. I think that's about where I'm gonna put this one too. And this one actually has this nice little tray. We can slide it out and it slides back in. So I'll use that. Maybe get rid of that part of it and mount it right there somehow. And then, yeah, just run the wire up over here. I have the connector for it. I just got stuck up in here right now. So I'll use, I haven't figured out exactly where that's going to come out, but I want to have it accessible with the kick panel on. Once the kick panel kind of comes up in here, I want it to stick out just a little bit so I can disconnect it. And this is where, if you were going to hook up to a laptop, tune it or something, you would plug the other USB harness into here, the same spot. So I want to have that accessible. They do make a splitter cable that you can buy, but I think that's more for if you have their big display, or you want to run multiple displays, one on each side of the dash or something. And I think I read that you can't tune it with if the other smaller display is plugged into the same time. So I just figured I'll just unplug it and just have it accessible. So I made up this bracket that mounts to the shifter bezel. That's gonna be where my display is, or my handheld display will be. So I just got a little bolt that goes through here. It kind of matches the rest of them, I guess. but it's just a little angled bracket. And that goes there. And then I'll paint it black so it kind of matches the rest of the interior here. But then I'll take this and probably just double-sided tape or something, stick that on there. And then the display will slide right in there. And then voila, staring right at me, I guess. So that should be a good view of everything. I don't think it'll be in the way of the legs of the passenger or anything, because the other one was kind of in that same spot and it wasn't too bad. So, and then I'll just route the wire kind of through this parking brake handle, and then along here, then up through the dash, and then over there. So there should be plenty of cord there. So I have my heads-up or my handheld display mounted here now on the dash after I just gave a little bracket of coat paint. And you can see it kind of run through there, and then it just runs along the dash and up and over. And then I got it plugged in right here, right there, so that I can easily access that. If I want to hook up with a laptop or whatever, I can use that cable. I also plugged in the outputs and inputs connector, and you know, it comes with that harness there basically. The white ones, which you can kind of see it's tucked up in here, but the white wires are all inputs, the gray ones are all outputs. And the only one that I'm going to be using is the gray output for the AC shutdown. That'll be this one with the gray with the white, or gray with black stripes, sorry. And then I'll be hooking that to the factory wire here, which is kind of a, I'd say a pink with a yellow wire. And that's basically just the ground signal for the relay cutout. So when you're on the throttle, it trips the relay to cut the compressor out. So I'll be hooking that up. And for the most part, that'll be everything in this kick panel that I need to hook up and kind of tie off and whatnot. Unless I have other issues once we get it running and stuff. So, all right, so I'm getting ready to put the intake back on, getting to that point. So kind of one last thing to put on here is a TPS sensor. This one here is okay, but one of the wires on the back side of the black one is starting to come loose or fray a little bit. So I didn't want to have any issues, so I just went and picked up a new one, Motorcraft unit. But with the Holley system, you got to take this connector off and replace it with the weather pack. Fairly simple thing to do. The harness has the other end of this connector, so it's just a matter of kind of cutting these wires, putting the terminals on there, and then sliding that in the connector. I'm going to take this apart here real quick, redo this harness. I want to get this plastic part off, just make it a little bit nicer, but then we'll put that on. Basically, you just have to match up these colored wires, the orange, green, and black, with the harness, which is orange, green, and black. So I got that labeled on here just so I don't screw it up, and then I'll pull that off. But yeah, fairly simple. So we'll do that quick, and then we can throw the intake back on and kind of finish up hooking up vacuum lines and stuff like that. So. Could have issues with that. Well, oh, maybe this comes off here. There we go. little spacer basically in there that was giving me trouble, because it's got this, I have a little adapter here that you can adjust it better, or more fine-tuned than if you did this and then without having to drill these holes bigger. So fits perfect now. Yep, never fails. Get all excited to put the intake back on. What happens, of course, the bolt strips out on the intake. So that bolt right there all stripped out on me. So now I get to put a helicoil in there, and of course the gasket ripped when I tried to take it off, so I don't have one. Gotta order one. Just more delayed stuff, but you know, keep hammering away. Just gotta get parts now. So while I wait for some parts for the intake, I'm waiting for a couple gaskets to show up before I can kind of put that back on. I figure I'll start installing my Innovate Motorsports wideband gauge and sensor here. This is basically everything that comes in the box. You have your white face gauge or your black one, and it comes with the black bezel and a silver bezel. If you want to switch them around, basically it's got, you know, the weld-in bung. This would be your O2 sensor right there. It's got the little adapter harness, basically that plugs into from the O2 sensor to the gauge, and then this is a actual cable for programming it if you want to hook to an actual computer. So that's everything that's in here. This gauge, you can actually, you know, it takes the usual power ground and switched on, but you can also use this yellow wire here basically to hook up to a data log as an input. So I'm going to see if I can get that to work with the Holley system. I got to double check on that, but it would be kind of nice to be able to read both the right and the left bank. Get this wideband gauge mounted up. I had a fuel pressure gauge mounted there, so I just took that out and installed that in there, ran all my wires, hooked everything up. Also had time to put the transmission cooler in. Remove the old tube and fin style. This one's, you know, physically bigger and longer, but they say that the stacked plate style like this is supposed to be way more efficient, so give it a shot, see what happens. I just had to make a couple brackets down here just to mount it, but otherwise everything, I didn't have to really do anything with the lines, just a matter of mounting it the right way in there. So got that done. That's another thing off the list. Next, I'm waiting for the intake gaskets, but I got this intake mounted up because I want to test fit the tube here, because I'm going to make that plate that kind of covers up this area, just to cover up some of the holes, but I got to figure out exactly where in this opening the pipe's going to come in. Gaskets finally came in for the intake, and I got the bolt all helicoiled up and repaired basically. So got the intake mounted up, wires hooked up, vacuum lines all hooked up now, so we can kind of get to the intake tube. This is an 80 degree that I had gotten off a Torqued website, and then this was a 60 degree that I got off of Summit. Now they're kind of odd size. They're 3 1/4 OD versus like 3 1/2 or 3, which are way more common. But I'll just be able to weld those two together like that. I'll have to cut this one a little bit up by the throttle body. Kind of show you how it's going to go if I can do this one-handed here. But that should work out just right. I'm just going to do a little trimming, weld that together. Haven't decided if I'm going to paint this or leave it aluminum, or I don't know how well my aluminum welding skills are going to be, if it'll look nice or what, or if I should have it powder coated or something like that, but we'll figure that out. Okay, got my intake tube welded up, and got just decided to put some paint on it. Wasn't sure what color I wanted, if I wanted to leave it bare aluminum or what, but ended up going with black. Got that hooked up. I believe all the wiring's ready to go. We should be ready to fire this thing off here fairly soon. Got to go through all the setup on the Holley. We'll kind of go over that next. I tried to go through the setup on the little handheld here, 3-inch screen there, and didn't really have good luck with it. Mainly when I went through all the stuff, I kind of was hoping it was going to be a lot easier going through the setup. basically answer a few questions, and it'll get you close. You know, I don't expect this thing to be dead on right after the first setup, but just, you know, get it enough to get it to a tuner and to the dyno and stuff, and then fine tune it there. But basically, when I was going through the setup, you know, it asks you what some of your cam profile is like and what injectors you have. A lot of the stuff that was in there I don't have on mine, so it was a little bit harder to set it up that way in there on the handheld than versus going with the laptop here. So I just decided to go ahead and get as close as I can set up here on the laptop. So I downloaded the software from Holley here and got it hooked up, and basically came into here, and I kind of run through this real quick. When you kind of go through this, they call it a global file, but you kind of open up a global file, and it'll basically give you a couple different options of, you know, is it naturally aspirated, is it turbocharged, supercharged. There's some kind of preloaded ones in there you can start with. So I had picked a small block Ford supercharged and kind of started from there and went through it. I'll kind of show you how I set mine up, or the stuff that I did change. A lot of this, you know, I'm kind of new to the tuning on this stuff, so like I said, I'm just trying to get it best I can, get it fired up, get it running, you know, get some of the self-learning going, and then eventually I'll get it to a tuner, and we can fine tune it from there. But I did watch a very good video that I recommend you guys watch if you have a similar setup. It was actually Brutal Blogs on YouTube. He did a video recently of him and Matt from Leach Motorsports. They kind of went through a video on how to set it up, and he's got a very similar setup. His is turbocharged, mine is supercharged, but 347, you know, small block Ford, so very similar setup. So I kind of mimicked a lot of what they had done here just to get me close. But I can kind of show you some of the things that I had gone through and changed. Some of this stuff too, I had to go and look up some of my sensor information, stuff like that. So there's a little research you might have to do depending on what sensors you're running, or if you're running a lot of the Holley stuff that's already pre-programmed, you can just pick and choose it. But we'll kind of, if you've downloaded this before, you kind of have an idea of what you know, what it looks like here. But basically, once you open this up, you have basically 5 different icons up here that most of your settings are in. First one is your fuel. It's a little injector there. Here I didn't get into too much stuff because a lot of this is going to be the tuner will be messing with this. Once I start running it and stuff, I might come back into here if I'm having issues. But it's got, you know, the base fuel graph and kind of chart there. There's not really much that I think I changed in here. No, I think most of this I left alone. Just because I wanted to see what it was, or you know, how it does when I fire it up. As far as sensors, if you click the next icon up there, I had to come in here and my MAF Sensor. I have a GM MAF Sensor. It was not pre-programmed into this. If you click this little click down menu here, it gives you a bunch of different ones. It's a 3-bar sensor, and there are some GM part numbers in here. Mine was not in here with the GM part number, so I had to come in and I had to actually look up information on it and then enter it in there. So basically I still have mine set up in KPA, the MAF Sensor. That's just the way the information that I found read, so I figured I'd just keep it there for now. I might change that over. There is a place to come in here, I think in Toolbox, and then Preferences up here, where you can change that. So basically I had to adjust the MAF sensor values on top here. It's 0 to 315. That would be for a 3-bar. And then basically the sensor voltage on the bottom, I just wanted to make sure was correct. It should be a pretty linear graph like that too, I guess, for mine. Coolant Temp sensor, that is the Holley sensor, so I didn't have to mess with that. Manifold air temperature sensor was another Holley sensor, so didn't have to mess with that. I did have the oil pressure sensor and the fuel pressure sensor. Were actually, I didn't get the Holley ones. Sorry, Holley, but I couldn't justify spending that much money on a sensor. So I ended up getting the Autex ones on Amazon. I've heard they're pretty good. So I just had to come in here, sensor type, do custom pressure, set that, and then come in here and they give you the information there. So it's basically 0 to 100 psi, and then you have to enter the sensor voltage on the bottom. Basically, if you enter the beginning voltage and the ending voltage, kind of same with the pressures on top here, you can have it fill in the rows for you in the middle. You just got to highlight them, right click, and then it'll say fill row values, or sometimes you can offset or smooth the selected stuff that you put on there, but for the most part you just fill the row values and it does it for you. So I had to do that both for the oil pressure and then the fuel pressure. Basically they're the same sensor, just reading something a little different. So that's pretty much it for the sensors that I had adjusted. The next icon over is the EFI tab. Here I came in and a lot of this was kind of already pre-set up, so I didn't have to change too many values, but because I bought the setup for the Ford Mustang, this 87 to 93, so it already kind of knew that it had 8 cylinders and multi-port fuel injection and stuff like that. So I did have to come in, change the engine displacement to 347. It's already on VE based load sensing. I think I'm going to keep that there. Asking me what kind of fuel. I'm just running gasoline. Here's where I didn't nope, here I just basically had to set in the what system pressure, fuel pressure I'm running, which is 43 pounds. Otherwise I didn't adjust too much there. Here for the fuel injector, I didn't know all this information. Like I said, I couldn't find the injectors. There's quite a list of injectors here. I'm running 42 pound injectors, EV ones, kind of stock. None of them were on here. I was trying to find if some of these Ford part numbers here were the ones, but they are not. So I had to just go with custom and then enter 42 pounds. And then that's at the 43 psi of fuel pressure. It's a sequential injection. And that's about the only thing you can pick there. As far as minimum injector opening time, I did not know that or what I wanted to adjust there. So we're going to basically run it and see if I need to change that or not. And then maybe the tuner will move that too. But and then here it just kind of shows you the graph too if you wanted to change injector off time versus the voltage, which that I do not know, so I left that alone. Oops, just trying to scroll back up here. Kind of click on ignition parameters here. Here I think I just had to enter the Ford TFI 8-cylinder sequential. Firing order is correct down here on the right. I have the high output, so mine is a little different than a basic 302. Older 302 has a different firing order, so make sure that's correct, depending on which engine you have. let's see, some of the sensor scaling warning deals here. I didn't mess with this. I kind of looked at it a little bit, but I haven't changed anything yet. I figured I'd wait and see once it's up and running. I can come back in here, and basically I think this just when your handheld is hooked up, you can you know, adjust when the warning light kind of comes on, or when it, you know, it tells you something's going on or whatever. You can adjust all the minimum and maximum on here, and for different sensors and RPM and battery voltage, stuff like that. So for now I left that alone. This is for the inputs and outputs along the top here. I didn't hook up my electric fans to here. I'm not running the fuel pump off of the Holley system. I may change that later, because one thing I noticed after I had I have the fuel pump just running off of the way it was from stock, but one thing that the stock ECU did was it would turn the fuel pump off after 5 seconds or so of priming. Now mine just runs. If I just leave the key on, it'll just keep running, which is fine once I start it up, but if I'm working on it and need the key on, the fuel pump will just keep running. So I just basically pull the relay out, and then it'll stop that. So kind of like when setting all this up here on the Holley parameters and stuff. But basically I don't have that set up yet, so most of this I didn't mess with. The AC shutdown I do have hooked up. That's on, enabled, so we'll see. I think everything is okay there. Here is for the torque converter clutch. I do not have an electric transmission in here, so none of that is set up. And then staging, I don't have any of that. So this is for closed loop learning. Basically this screen tells you, you know, versus RPM and what your MAF sensor is reading. This lets you know as far as how much variation the learning can do, so it can go 50% up, 50% down when it's trying to hit a set target. They say kind of you should keep this high at the beginning when it's trying to learn, you know, so it can learn, take different big leaps or whatever, and try and narrow that up. And then as the computer learns, basically, you want to narrow these numbers down, maybe closer to 10 or 20% each way, just so it hits that higher, closer target, you know. So I do not have variable cam timing, so none of that was changed. Here are some fuel corrections and timing corrections per cylinder, individual cylinder. I did not mess with that yet. That can come way later once all the tuning is fine-tuned. You want that last little bit out. So next would be, so this would be all your inputs and outputs here. Let's see, it basically gives you the list. I don't know, I don't think I changed anything here on this screen. I did mess with some of the outputs, so let's go to here. This little tab up here is your inputs and outputs also. Kind of a little bit better screen, but so this would be my inputs. I have that Innovate wideband that I mounted to, and I actually hooked that up to one of the number 2 input. So I just had to set up the 5 volt. You know, I named it wideband. It's got a 5 volt. Either can be a 12 volt positive ground, digital speed, 5 volt, or CAN input. So I just had to go 5 volt, and then I had to configure it and enable it. So basically all that's going to do is, even though I have the gauge up there which will tell me what's going on, I can also see it and log it with the Holley system. So I can, you know, on the handheld I can make one of the little gauges on there or readings on there, this wideband, so it'll actually tell me both. It'll be redundant. But the one thing I wanted to do is have that so I can do the data logging when I'm driving, so I can see, being that's on one side of the on the left bank of the exhaust and the Holley is on the right side bank, I can actually see what both are doing versus just the Holley telling me what's going on. So I have that enabled. The outputs, I don't think I'm using any of the outputs, the extra ones. There are some, I'm trying to find it here. It must be in this pin map. If you go to the pin map here, yep, here we go. This just tells you what actually is hooked up. So once you set up in those outputs or inputs, it'll actually, and you save it, it'll bring it up to this unassigned inputs up here. And you'll actually have to take that and drag that into one of these inputs or outputs. You'll see it up there. So wideband was up here before. I just had to drag it down here, and so it knows, which input I want it to do it to. So I have that on the A3 pin, input number 2. If I go to outputs, this shows the electric fans already set up in there. For some reason, Holley, if you watch a lot of videos, they don't. It has the idle air control actually pre-pinned to output number 4, so it's already ready to go. But in the software here, they have the IAC set up here in unassigned. So as soon as you log into this, it's already sitting there. You just have to drag it and bring it down to output number 4, so it can control that idle air control. So that's one thing I did there. Just trying to think if there was anything else I set up here, but it kind of shows you all the injectors. Here's your basically everything that's set up or already pinned to the main connectors on the Holley ECU. So even though you set them up, let's get out of this screen. Even though you set up your inputs here and your outputs, and you save them and then get them all configured and everything, that's not going to automatically do it. Even though it's, you pick that certain pin or whatever here, you still have to go to the pin map up here on top and basically put them in, assign them, I guess, to the actual one, and then it should be good to go. But I think we got everything there. Let's see, idle speed. A lot of this there too, I was kind of going off of the that Brutal Blogs video, which, like I said, I recommend. It was very good, thorough video with those two. So a lot of my settings here, I did change some of my idle spark, the idle air control here. You have to, I think you have to pick, that's a 5.0 liter forward. It's pulse width modulation, and then and that all depends on what type of IAC you're running, if you are at all. And then the frequency I set at 315. Let's see, I think some of this ramp down stuff I did not change. Let's go to idle speed here. Some of this I had changed according to watching that video. So I'm set around 800 RPM, basically at idle. Once it warms up, this is all according to temperature here. So it actually starts at around 1050 here, and then lowers down to 800 once it actually gets warmer. And this too, you can set this graph wherever you want it to, you know, and basically once you get all your settings in here, you can come in and set this, smooth this out. You hit the kind of select the ones that you want to change, and then right click it, and then it'll say smooth all or whatever, and that way it's not such a sharp change. Sorry. Let's see. And this is IAC parked. I can't remember if I had changed some of this. I think I did. Let's go over to Spark here now. Here again, I didn't really change anything in the Spark. I'm not well enough versed in tuning these that I can go in through and mess all that up right now, so I thought I'd leave that alone. You have the rev limiter, launch retard. Remember what the ESC parameters are. I didn't mess with this. Timing versus coolant temp. I did change some of this according to that video. And I don't think timing versus air temp I touched. No, everything's at 0 there. So and then spark input versus rev limiter and launch retard, you can adjust that. I don't plan on doing a whole lot of racing, so I don't think I'm going to do too much of that, changing that around. But that's basically what I did to get this set up. So I haven't tried firing it up yet, so I think we're gonna try and do that. So I went through the whole tune up here. Basically got everything that I just had showed you, that I changed and whatnot, and basically went to start it, and it just cranked and cranked and cranked on me. Did some troubleshooting, wasn't getting any spark. So, you know, why am I getting spark or not getting spark? And nothing really changed, you know, on the wiring part of that. But I also noticed too that the handheld display here, when I would crank it, you know, it would come on when you turn the key on, but the minute I would crank to go to start it, it would cut out and kind of reboot. So started to think that maybe I didn't have the right ignition power going to the Holley system. And so yeah, I had the red with the white wire that the Holley tells you to hook up to ignition switch, you know, and it has to have power while it's cranking. I had it hooked up to a wrong wire, you know, made a mistake, it happens. And so it was wired up in here, just cut that loose and then found another wire up inside here that has power while cranking. And then that solved my ignition problem, or the spark. Went to start it, and basically it fired up, but it was barely running and coughing and spitting, and you could give it a little throttle and it was, you know, okay, but it wouldn't stay there, and it was at idle, it would run really lean. So I was like, well, now what, you know, something's wrong there. So I kind of messed around with the tune a little bit, trying to figure out if I messed something up. Basically found out that I didn't sync it to the ECM. So I went through all this, you know, saved it as a global file, and I guess I assumed or thought that when I saved it, it would, you know, maybe save it to the ECM, but turns out I actually have to, if you look, there's the little round circle there, that's the sync button. And basically once I was all done, then I just had to sync it to the ECM. You can go, you know, sync it from the ECM if you want, if there's a tune on there you want to take off or copy or something. And so yeah, once I did that and went to start it, man, fired up and ran. I'll do it for you right now. Whoops, okay, come on. So there you go. It runs, you know, runs pretty good. Still needs to get tuned, but it still has to learn a little bit too. So next step is basically kind of throw the bumper on it, you know, get it somewhat back together so I can go road drive it, let it learn a little bit, and then I want to see if I can get it into the tuner. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited, I guess, just to get it back on the road, try it out, see how it does. We'll get it tuned, like I said, and then maybe I'll probably end the video here. It's probably long enough the way it is. I appreciate you guys watching, following along as I go through this. So I might do a part 3, I guess, to dyno it and, you know, see what happens, or road testing it. But yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for sticking with me, and we'll see you guys later.